Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, August 29th, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist and director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And Matt's colleague at AEI, our Washington commentary, our media commentary columnist, and the author of the forthcoming book, The Extinction of Experience, which we will be discussing at length next week, as its pub date is September 10th?
Yes.
September 10th. Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
So we have a rash of new polls out, state-level polls and national polls. The national polls, one from USA Today and one from somewhere else, I can't remember, have Harris up between 4 and 5 points. The battleground state polls, which are from Emerson and Fox, have the race a jump ball in 4 or 5 states, mostly the Sun Belt states. I learned something new this week, which is that you can somehow call North Carolina a Sun Belt state like you call Arizona and Nevada Sun Belt states. I don't understand this designation of a Sun Belt state that seems to be a common between North Carolina and Arizona. That is not a political block that is known to me. But evidently this terminology is acceptable. It should not be. We need new terms.
Where would you begin the Sun Belt?
Well, okay, so according to what I read, the Sun
because
Belt
isn't the Sun Belt
just south of Virginia and west of West Virginia, but then it goes to California.
Isn't it
so it's basically half
hasn't
the
it
country.
Become a synonym for the South? That's what we say with the Sun Belt.
No, because the West, then we got the West, and then we got
because Arizona's not the South. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I would put North Carolina. I think North Carolina is in upstate New York. Actually.
Yeah, I would say that there was south of the Mason-Dixon line. That was the South. Then you have the West, which is like Arizona, Nevada, California, maybe even Oklahoma, you could argue, Utah, Idaho. That to me would be the West. But what do I know? I'm not a cartographer. I'm not a terminology creator. I just think there's literally nothing in common between North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada, politically, culturally, socially, ideologically, or anything. And so referring to all of them as the Sun Belt states is, I think,
this is the
idea.
designation, John.
There's a precedent. There's a precedent, which is that
there are 18 Sun Belt states.
When the Carolina Panthers came into the NFL, they were put in the NFC West.
See,
they were in North Carolina. So there's a precedent.
We can't go there. If we start going into where they put people in the formerly geographically located subdivisions of our professional sports teams, that way lies madness. And I do not want to cause
you're pushing a boulder
insane.
Up the hill, because geographically, the Sun Belt are the states that comprise the Southeast and the Southwest.
Okay, so it's
it
nonsense.
starts with North Carolina and it extends
Southwest
to Nevada.
Okay. So it's nonsense. It's a nonsense term that makes no sense, and we should, as people who believe in precision, we should not accept this.
I'm giving you the definition.
That is not a reputation.
Just so you know,
whose definition is this? Who came
according
up
to
with
the
it?
NCAA, according to the NCAA,
Yes.
the Sun Belt stops going west at Texas.
Okay, who said it's the Sun Belt? No one told me, and I am objecting. Now we can move on to more serious matters, because apparently in the Sun Belt, as it is now defined improperly, it's a jump ball state by state, with Harris up by 1 or Trump up by 1. They're both in the high 40s, according to these polls, which seem to be pushing everybody to give a choice, because the numbers are right around 50-50. So that means they're not accepting, for the purposes of these poll questions, somebody saying, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. Which makes it an interesting question about whether the polls are valid at all, since we know that 10% of the country doesn't know whom they're voting for. If they don't show up at these polls and you push them, how do you know that the answer that you're pushing them toward is going to be an accurate answer, when the accurate answer is, I don't know? But nonetheless, what it shows is it's a jump ball in those states. But nationally, polls that don't matter, really, Harris is showing evidence either of the surge that began from the minute that she came into the campaign and has lasted to the present moment, or some kind of mini surge that added on to the previous surge as a result of the convention. Matt, you have been skeptical that Harris had some kind of a polling bump from the convention. Are you still willing to defend that position?
Yes, I am, because these
the Sun Belt. You're willing to defend.
I'm defending the Sun Belt. And by the way, just in the brief interlude between our Sun Belt debate and your challenge to me on the polling, I learned that the person who coined the term Sun Belt was Kevin Phillips in his 1969 classic, The Emerging Republican Majority. So,
yeah, but that was the only book he ever wrote that he got anything right.
Well, no, I know.
So maybe
I don't think you and I are not the biggest fans of Kevin Phillips.
Yes, so fair enough.
The reason to disagree with his terminology.
Okay, good.
Okay. So what's a bounce? A bounce is when you're definitively leading the race in the aftermath of your convention, and the fact is, Kamala Harris is not definitively leading the race. This is a toss-up race. All of this polling, whether it's the Fox poll or the Hill Emerson battleground poll that came out, shows that these battleground states are jump balls. I mean, the Fox has him winning in some states that the Hill Emerson has her winning in, and vice versa. And that says to me that it's a toss-up. Now, she has had a surge, but it's a surge among Democrats. And that is important because there are more Democrats than there are Republicans in the United States of America. She has consolidated the Democratic vote. She is leading narrowly among independent voters, which I do think should be a concern in the Trump campaign. But I see this as a toss-up race heading into Labor Day weekends, and I think that if she had a real bounce out of her convention, she'd be leading in these battlegrounds outside the margin of error, and she isn't.
Can we quickly, maybe this is a moment to take a minute to explain what it means to say that a race is a jump ball? Just to go into the margin of error, because I know many people listening understand what we're talking about here. Polls try to measure responses of a small subset of people that are meant to stand in for the larger set of people. And since that cannot be done with full accuracy, they attempt to approach what they call a 95% degree of whatever there's some term there are these sort of, again, fake terms like the Sun Belt that the psephology community has come up with to explain the Bayesian blah 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 or whatever. Okay, so but basically what is if a race, if you're told by the pollster that a race has a 3% margin of error, that means that the numbers that appear, let's say a number is 49%, that means that the range of possibilities for that person who gets 49% range from 46% to 52%, because you cannot quantify. So if you have a race that's 49 to 48, right, which is what I think 3 of or 4 or 5 of these different results are, that means the person with 49 is it could be as high as 53 or as low as 45, and the person at 48 could be as high as 52 and as low as 44, and either of those could be the case, and therefore a 1-point lead in a poll is not a lead. It cannot be viewed as a lead. It is numerically a lead because it means that when they asked 1,000 people, a few more people out of those 1,000 people said Harris rather than Trump. But that is not a statistically significant number of people. You can report it. It's the actual only hard data you have. But based on prior experience, you cannot know that Harris is a point ahead by definition. If Harris is 5 points ahead in a poll that has a margin of error of 4 points, she is definitively ahead. If Trump is ahead by 5 and there's 3, Trump is definitively.
And what we do know is Trump is polling better today than he polled in either 2020 or 2016. And Trump in the past has outperformed his polling. So whether it's the shy Trumpers, whether it's the partisan non-response to polling, the fact that Trump voters who tend to be individuals who are extremely suspicious of institutions, including major media organizations that conduct polling, so they won't pick up. All of these are factors to make us just look at these polls with, a raised eyebrow. The conservative activist Ryan Girdusky had a very interesting article the other day on the American Conservative saying how older white liberals are essentially ruining polling because they're the only people
over-responding.
Yeah, they're over-respond. They pick up their phones, and I don't know if you noticed this about older white liberals. They love to tell you what they think about politics. They'll tell anyone.
Pollsters. They're calling the pollsters.
They're right. They're calling the pollsters, but they will go down the street and tell you that they think Trump is a Nazi, and then they'll go down to the next person and tell them that too. So I think that's just worth keeping in mind as we recognize that this is an extremely close race, and Harris could easily win it.
Right, of course. Yeah. Now, okay, the other point to make is now about how polls try to figure out model. All polls are models because you have a country in which 60% of the people vote. It's hard to get people to answer the phone. So there are three different kinds of polls. There's polls of adults, right, in which you basically say, hi, are you over 18? Person says yes. You say who you're going to vote for. Person says Trump. You write it down. And then, you may ask other questions. You ask whether they're Republican or Democrat. You ask whether they're young or old, whatever. But that's a poll of adults. And for a very long time, it was said that polls of adults were not helpful because so many people didn't vote, and that therefore you were bringing in a lot of people who didn't vote and you couldn't get an accurate result. Then voter turnout began to surge. This is, I think, 2008. Voter turnout began to surge, and the American adults began to look more and more like the American electorate, whereas in the 40 years previous, voters were kind of a distinct body within the American electorate. And so pollsters would try to capture them by using what is called a likely voter. Or you would have then you would have registered voters. You'd ask them, are they a registered voter? They would say yes. Then you'd ask them the question. So at least you knew, if they're being honest, that they were at least in the community of people who could vote, which adults, when you just ask adults, you're not even asking whether they're registered. And then there was the third, which was supposed to be the gold standard. That was likely voters. And likely voters, again, mattered a lot more when only 50% of the public voted. And pollsters would ask questions of the respondents to see if they were likely voters. Those questions were, do you intend to vote? How seriously do you intend to vote? Did you vote in the last election? Did you vote in the last two elections? And do you remember whom you voted for? And it depends on who was asking. And so then you would have a likely voter screen. And pretty much until polling started to get totally wonky and crazy in like 2010, 2012, people wanted likely voter screens. On Mark Halperin's two-way conversation last night, Ann Seltzer, who runs the Iowa poll that is considered by most people the gold standard of polling in the United States, said she hates likely voter screens because you are trying to model an electorate that will not exist until election day. You cannot know who is a likely voter because you don't know what the dynamic is, and that she uses a different method. And so a couple of these polls, at least one of these two national polls, I can't remember which that I cited, is a likely voter screen poll. And whereas people with long memories can remember that 15 years ago, you were like, well, I'm not going to look at that. I need to wait for a likely voter poll. It is now probably wiser to take either a registered voter poll or an all adults poll to be more accurate than a likely voter poll, because the pollster is laying on a theory about who is going to vote in 2024, because then they also try to wait for age and gender and stuff like that and try to model an electorate that they're inventing in their own head based on real reasonable guesses if they're responsible, but they're still guesses.
It's hard, and it's especially hard in the era where people don't have landlines, where people don't pick up their phones if they see a number they don't recognize, where the dominant political figure of the age appeals to people who are not normally interested or invested in politics. I mean, you can maybe start the likely voter screens once we start seeing the boat parades and car caravans, right? Which will probably begin appearing in the next month or so when the Trump supporters arrange these things, grassroots activities that they did in 2020, where they ride boats, along bays or rivers, flying Trump flags. Or I encountered several in the run up to the 2020 election where I'm driving on I-95, and in the opposite direction, there are huge caravans of trucks and cars and SUVs flying Trump flags down the highway. So it's hard to pick that up when you're polling. And he's a unique figure in that way. Now, Kristen Solis Anderson, a friend, she recently wrote in the New York Times that, look, in 2022, the polls were fairly accurate. 2018, the polls were fairly accurate. But in years where Trump's had them on the ballot, the polls have a slight miss because of his unusual appeal to people who are hard to capture if you're a pollster in Washington.
Now, weirdly enough, in 2012, that worked in Obama's favor because the 2012 get out the vote work on the part of the Democrats was so astonishingly effective that Obama was the one who was surfacing voters who had never voted before or whom people didn't even know were present. And so if you remember the final polling between Romney and Obama had it at 49-49, almost at 4 different national polls on the weekend before the election, and Obama won by 4.
And with Romney leading among independents. Yes. Right. And this explains, by the way, why Harris and Walz have spent yesterday and today in southeastern Georgia, because what the polls in 2012 didn't capture was this surge in black voters for Obama. And Harris and Walz are there in these rural communities in Georgia now, trying to excite and eventually turn out or collect the ballots thereof of black voters who might otherwise decide to stay home. So this is another takeaway from this polling, and not just that it's a toss-up, but that Harris does have opportunities to get to 270 electoral votes that had been closed to Joe Biden, right? I mean, for the duration of the year up until the great switcheroo, Biden really had no entree into winning those, I'm going to use the word, Sunbelt states, because Trump's leads were outside the margin of error in many of them. But now it is a margin of error game. And so Harris thinks, oh, well, if I win Georgia, then I have other avenues to winning the presidency. If I win North Carolina, same thing.
Well, and this is where her messaging coming out of the convention has actually been successful. Despite our, those of us who are a little cynical about her manufactured joy, she is now in some polls of who voters think is the change candidate. She comes out as the change candidate, despite being part of the current administration. And she has successfully positioned herself not as a former vice president or current vice president, but as, a former prosecutor. All of these ways of not linking herself
former
to
McDonald's
Biden.
Employee.
Yes, well, Frygate. I predict Frygate is going to break wide open.
Is on the case.
Yes, the French fry claim is going to be broken wide open. But her message, she's a much more appealing candidate right now, certainly than Joe Biden, but than Trump. They're talking about age again. They're talking about enthusiasm. She is projecting an image coming out of her convention, which is precisely what they wanted. And Trump is not doing much to puncture that because he's kind of all over the map right now.
Can I go low a little bit? Because I did make this joke about McDonald's, and I was thinking about the Harris's, she worked at McDonald's thing. She knows, stars, they're just like us. They had their first job at McDonald's, right? So we're now told that the job at McDonald's was during college. Kamala Harris is a student at Howard University in Washington, D.C. when she goes to college. She is young. She is beautiful. She is in college. That is not a person whose first job is at McDonald's. I'm sorry. I've read books about McDonald's. I've read books about who gets hired at McDonald's. I lived in Washington, D.C. She could have gotten a better job than working at McDonald's, and this is the first chink in the Kamala's bizarrely reverse padded resume, right? Which is, I'm just like you. I was at the Fry
Trying to
Basket.
look,
I
she's
was
projecting
doing
middle
the
class.
milkshake.
Yes. Yes,
Right.
she wants to be seen
And
as
I
middle
just,
class.
She worked
think,
at McDonald's. I mean, isn't there a way to know for sure?
She's
that
not
she
responding to questions from reporters.
First of all,
about that.
there is no, just because I actually know, it's ridiculous that I even know this, but McDonald's is a franchise system, so there is no actual central like database of people who have worked in. We only know from national polling, that at least at one point in the 1990s, 1/7 of all first jobs in the United States were first jobs at a McDonald's. But they were all teenagers. That's why they're first jobs, and they weren't college students. Like, that's not a college student job. At least it wasn't when she is 3 years younger than I am. I never knew anybody who went to college who had to get a job at McDonald's to get a job to make money.
Well, there was one change as we investigate Frygate.
Okay. Yes.
Initially, the Harris campaign said that she had this job at McDonald's to pay her way through college. And now they have walked that back. And they're saying that she had the job at McDonald's just to make some extra money while she was attending Howard University. So the lies are being exposed in real time.
I'm going to tell you one other thing, and I'm just going to say this flat out. She went to Howard in the mid to late 1980s. Howard is in an area of Northwest DC that is not safe, or was really not safe. And working at a McDonald's in a really not safe neighborhood strikes me as being a little bit of a stretch for somebody who grew up in Montreal and might have had better prospects for getting better work somewhere else where she wouldn't necessarily get mugged on her way home from the McDonald's.
Well, what we understand, though, to clarify, according to the Free Beacon's investigative team, is that the alleged McDonald's franchise was actually in the Bay Area. It was not in DC.
Oh, okay.
All
right. So I apologize because the Bay Area, of course. Yeah, because you want to drive 20 miles to the McDonald's. Whatever, it doesn't matter. This is all ridiculous.
But Doug did work at the McDonald's. That's what's a little bit weird, is that we do have evidence that the second gentleman was a McDonald's employee, and that figured heavily into the convention programming. And now we have this news story that she too was a McDonald's employee. By the way, they're from California. Shouldn't you want to have worked at In-N-Out? It's like McDonald's is looked down upon in California.
The first McDonald's was in California. The McDonald's that invented the 8 milkshake rotator system. I know too much about this. Anyway,
there's that great movie.
There's another possibility. There's another possibility.
We don't have enough to talk about today. Anyway, go ahead.
Look, just in case there's some mistake. I've looked it up, and it could be the McDonald printing shop. It could be the McDonald Chrome shop, which is one of the largest stocking dealers of semi-chrome and accessories in the Midwest. There's also the McDonald Observatory, where she might have worked at the astronomy gift shop. So I'm just maybe it's not the restaurant.
So this is like the Four Seasons gardening and landscaping, as opposed to the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia. The first mark of Rudy Giuliani's the severe decline into which he continues to fall as into a black hole. Abe, we have been ignoring you as we have been dealing with these deeply important French fry and milkshake issues. The milkshakes are terrible, by the way. No one should ever have a McDonald's milkshake. I think. Can we agree on that?
I don't like McDonald's at all.
Okay.
Food wise.
How are you?
I'm not criticizing the company. I don't care how many calories. I don't care what they put in the pink.
That's pretty elitist.
I don't enjoy it.
It sounds like a coastal something. A coastal elite
can't not enjoy a McDonald's French fry. That is not possible.
The
McDonald's
French fry technology has leapt forward in such enormous steps that I think they've left.
Listen,
what was I would agree with you. The gold standard.
Them
they've
anymore,
left it
but
behind.
when I
yeah.
could, you just couldn't do better. Okay, anyway. So I think you're now firmly on the record. You do not like McDonald's. We're not going to go to what fast food places you like. You are our vibes reader. You are the person I believe who has the best take on the American vibe. And these polls suggest that the Kamala Harris vibing, at the very least, is effective. Up to right, these are snapshots of a moment. So this is the snapshot of this last week in August 2024. And if you're going for vibes, you want her vibes and not Trump's vibes, right?
Yeah, I think it's still working, which is not to say that it won't stop at some point. I don't know that it will or recede, but I think the vibe thing is still happening. By the way, I remember even up till that moment of that Romney Obama poll, I also felt the Obama vibe was still very much in effect.
All right, so basically, you were right about everything, and we're wrong about everything,
including McDonald's.
Including McDonald's. Well, okay, fair enough. All right, let me just take a quick break to talk to you guys about our friends at NetSuite. So, quick math. Obviously, the less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform with one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required, accessed from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move, so do the math and see how you'll profit with NetSuite. By popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/commentary. That's netsuite.com/commentary, netsuite.com/commentary. So in the vibe versus policy game came the controversy of the week. On Monday, Donald Trump went on the anniversary or around the anniversary of the horrible massacre at Abbey Gate, where 13 American servicemen were killed in the pullout from Afghanistan in 2021. Trump accompanied two Gold Star families whose family members had been killed in Iraq to Arlington National Cemetery to lay a wreath at their graves. At first blush, a sensationally effective bit of symbolic policy, a moment of emotion, symbolism, and policy all mixed in one. Biden and Harris responsible for the disastrous pullout in Afghanistan that resulted in these deaths. An anniversary that they were not commemorating, except Harris with a letter or, a word that Harris had never contacted any of these families. Trump having the support of at least two of these families because of what happened, and then showing respect by showing up at the grave with them and laying a wreath at the cemetery. I think we said that day or whatever, the day after that, Trump, that was one of the few days that Trump had won. And so almost instantaneously, Trump's victory is then compromised on that day by a news story that emerges that he had misused two things. One, he had misused Arlington Cemetery. He can't do what he did, which is to go and have a campaign photograph taken particularly in this area of Arlington Cemetery, Section 60, which is apparently where the more recent graves are of of servicemen who have died and are buried in Arlington, and secondly that he had violated, and this is where it gets complicated, which we'll get back to. He had violated rules by being there, wasn't allowed to be there. Some official at Arlington said you can't be here, and they, according to one account, someone had pushed that official aside. Okay.
It's not that they couldn't be there. He was allowed to attend as a private citizen, having a private commemoration graveside invited by Gold Star families. The altercation came because there were photographs that were going to be taken. There are official photographers at Arlington. There are very strict rules about the kinds of pictures you can take there, namely because they don't want other people's headstones with their names visible in the photo, in any sort of public photograph for which the families of those service members have not given their permission. And in that sense, Trump did mess up. The photos that were released, even by the other families, disregarded that rule. You're not supposed to take pictures of other people's graves and use them to promote anything, even your own commemoration. So in that sense, I think I don't know if that's a campaign violation, but it's certainly a sort of disrespectful. It's seen as disrespectful by other families. And so you want to be very careful in that in Arlington Cemetery. So the altercation seems to be about whether the photographers that were traveling with Trump were allowed to take those images.
Well, we don't, this story, the fact that we're even talking about this story means that the story has bite and has cast a shadow over what happened. And so that's why you want to like advance the stuff better so that you don't create a second day story about this. But the story's hinkier than you're
I
think
on. I think the story has all the marks of a resistance hit job. Let's remember it came out after the solemn occasion that the Trump campaign staff had some sort of altercation with an Arlington Cemetery employee, and this employee got very angry. The employee says it was some physical aspect of it pushed aside or somehow.
An altercation, right?
That's the word that the media is using. But the employee won't say anything more or identify themselves
or press charges or go to some official to make an official complaint because why?
There was
she says because
is it a she?
They say
I think it's a woman. Yes, she told the Times she's afraid there'll be retaliation if she does.
Now there was a report that was filed, but then that has been closed. And
because this employee would not speak further about the event. That's why the file was closed, because there's one source. There's one person. Now, the Trump campaign agrees that there was some kind of confrontation with somebody at Arlington because Chris LaCivita, the campaign spokesman, who is a lunatic, from what I can tell, though very good at his job, decided, while she's saying she fears for her life from Trump, said something like a crazy person had Trump derangement syndrome at the cemetery, which is really... That's really good politics on the part of somebody who's supposed to know politics. Like, why don't you attack an employee and call her crazy?
But the point is that Trump was there at the invitation of the families.
Right.
Yes, but Trump could shut this story down very simply by saying, look, if we stepped on any other service members' families' toes by inadvertently capturing an image that they didn't want, we apologize. That would stop it. But he won't. Like I mean, he was there at their invitation, and they were very grateful to have him there. But I think it's not that this is an entirely ginned up story. It's an example of the sort of disordered approach that the Trump campaign is taking when they do these very sensitive events. It's a sensitive area. I mean, I think,
and it also feeds into a strange kind of weakness in Trump land, which is this recurring rumors about him saying ugly things about service members, about Medal of Honor winners, beginning, of course, with
it's a story.
Beginning, of course, with his attack on John McCain.
That's why
way
it's a
back
story.
when.
It feeds the narrative that Trump is nasty to veterans or to servicemen and women who have lost their lives in combat, and that's why you have the story being advanced by Maggie Haberman and other reporters at the New York Times trying to finding the mother, I believe, of one of the soldiers whose names on his gravestone was captured, and then elevating that, and trying to turn this 1-day story into a 2 to 3 day story, because it reinforces this attack line that Trump is selfish and does not respect soldiers. Veterans have become a weird, I use that word now, aspect to this campaign. Where there's Vance, there's Walz, there's the questions over Walz's service. One of the most one of the most vociferous exchanges between Trump and Biden in the June 27th speech was over who was better for veterans. So there's this meta story about this campaign, which is, who do you think treats the veterans better, Trump or the Democrat? And when you look at this event on the surface, here's Trump laying wreaths at the invitation of the Gold Star families. Many of the people with Trump at the time have gone on the record using their name, saying that they didn't see anything wrong happen, and they don't understand why this is becoming such a controversy. You have Jerry Dunleavy, the writer who he literally wrote the book on the 13 service people killed at the Abbey Gate. He's saying that the family statement is true and real. They wanted Trump there. And by the way, he also surfaced examples of Biden having press releases of him at military cemeteries, in this case overseas. So to me, it just has the ring of something that's been manufactured in order to score political points against Trump on an issue where Kamala Harris is weak, because she continues to defend the pullout and the way in which it was conducted.
Also, because Democrats are fighting for a specific angle here, which is patriotism. The convention was notable for flags everywhere, and the stream of stories that came out saying Democrats are reclaiming patriotism. I love that Democrats are reclaiming the flag. This was, something a lot of pundits were saying. And so this is the sort of thing that undercuts that too. Kamala Harris has no foreign policy experience, and she has it's just her. Every time you ask something, the campaign says, well, we've been clear. The candidate has said X, Y, and Z, because she hasn't done X, Y, and Z. There's just Kamala's statements that you're supposed to trust. And so This is the one area of the patriotism thing where she has some weakness, which is foreign policy related things. And Afghanistan falls into that even more than it falls into how they treat veterans. I think this is a reminder that she was part of an absolute foreign policy disaster, and that's harder on the flag waivers.
Right. Okay, so I did as much of a dive as I could on this question, because the original story said that the photographs that were taken violated federal law. And if anybody can locate that federal law and send it to me, please podcast@commentary.org. I would be grateful, because all that I've been able to locate, and granted, I only spent an hour trying to do this, and it's hard to go through federal code, are citations from the Army Public Affairs and regs. And one of them involves the idea that you cannot do this because there would be, if certain types of people do this, it would violate the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act is the law that says that employees of the federal government cannot electioneer. And consulting with our friend Adam White, who was on yesterday, we both took this to mean that if you enlist federal employees at Arlington in an effort to get these photographs taken, and they participate with you in it, they could be accused of a violation of the Hatch Act if those photographs are used for electioneering purposes. There is also but that's a reg. It's not a law. And secondly, there's an Army handbook, like a kind of handbook on public affairs in the military, that says something about how photographs of thus and such or other cannot be used for thus and such purpose. Now,
But this is actually a norms violation more than it's a federal law
no,
violation.
but I'm
That's
talking
where
about
it
the
has-
media. But
Right.
the media,
well, the media is
said
trying to make
it was a
into
federal that they broke the law taking these
Right.
pictures.
Then they should
And I
file
would like
another
to know,
indictment
but I
against
would-
Trump.
But
You
I
know,
would like to know, I would actually like to know if that were true, because that is a very violating a reg that was promulgated by the military, or the military's handbook for proper conduct at Arlington or at this handbook, by the way, governs everything. It's like how you're supposed to deal with people who take photographs of sensitive military installations. There's a lot of different stuff there. And I just want to point out that if it's never been tested legally, there are real First Amendment questions here. You can't just say you're not allowed to take a picture at Arlington Cemetery. Arlington Cemetery is a public facility. It is not private. People have free speech rights to take photographs. That's no different. You have a right to be at Arlington. I've taken photographs of myself at Arlington. That this part of the cemetery is in particular sensitive because it has the most recent people who have fallen in war in it is incredibly sad and incredibly potent, but it cannot have a different legal status from other areas at Arlington Cemetery or at other military cemeteries, including Pointe du Hoc, which I think is what Matt was referring to. I mean, Biden was at Pointe du Hoc having his photograph taken during the Normandy celebrations. Granted, that was
it was a
years
different.
ago.
It was also in France, but it was a different. It was a different American military cemetery than.
But Arlington, you can't know this. These laws this Army handbook refers to cemeteries everywhere. It doesn't refer to Arlington. There's no specific thing governing Arlington, and so as far as I know, Ronald Reagan had 10 billion photographs taken of him. So if this photograph were taken by a news organization rather than a campaign, that would be acceptable. Campaigns have free speech rights. I'm sorry, that would have to be tested. Again, it doesn't matter in the ultimate political sense about whether or not this cast enough of a shadow to neutralize some of the potent effect of the photograph. And maybe the norms violation that you're talking about, Christine, and that Adam was arguing with me on our chat, is bad enough. Like, they just shouldn't have done it if there was any controversy. I just don't think that they knew that there was any controversy.
They could have done it. I'm not arguing they shouldn't have done it.
Okay.
You're allowed to invite anyone you want to a private service gravesite. It's that they should have done better. They should have known going in how sensitive they needed to be and been very careful about what images they projected, especially since they were using their own photographer, not the sort of official photographer there.
But
I mean, what
remember
it says to me overall is that, like, Harris and her supporters and the resistance, as Matt says, they are so much more on top of their game than Trump is right now, that they can find anything any day to minimize a Trump victory, negate a Trump victory, while the Trump campaign is unable to make what I think has the potential to be some very big take some very big shots at Harris and Walz, at Harris specifically, in terms of her policy, her record, what she's saying, her ducking, and all of it. And they sort of can't break through with any of that. And we're here talking about this story because the Harris side can break through with nothing.
And that's because the media is on her side.
Absolutely.
And that, look, that is a disadvantage.
Up, so, the parent didn't see her kid's grave in the TikTok, right? Somebody from the New York Times called her up and said, hey, if you look, you can see your son's grave in this part of a TikTok video. Does that bother you?
So I just want to, I don't think we've talked about this on the podcast, but I want to rewind to last week at the Democratic convention, where in the middle of a NewsHour special on the election, Judy Woodruff said to the PBS audience that her reporting showed that Donald Trump was calling Benjamin Netanyahu and telling him not to accept the bridging proposal and the ceasefire deal. And
in Gaza. Right.
Yeah. And 24 hours later, Woodruff was forced to apologize on air because she had fabricated that story. There was no evidence. And in
it's
fact,
worse than that.
I mean,
It's
we
worse
know
than that.
Well, we know that Trump is telling Netanyahu to finish up as quickly as possible.
It's
Go ahead.
worse than that because Woodruff was not known for being unscrupulous, by the way. So that's what's interesting. Though she is getting on.
She
let's
heard
just
something from somebody told her.
She said Axios and Reuters had reported that Bibi and Trump had spoken, and this is what she said, and that Trump had told Bibi not to accept the bridging deal, which he in fact had accepted. So, but it turns out neither Axios nor Reuters reported any such thing. They had said that Bibi and Trump had spoken.
Right.
Period. And she made up the rest of it.
Right.
And then went in her first apology, blamed somebody else. She didn't say, I misread or I misapprehended something. I thought I saw something that I didn't. She said, I didn't report it out myself. So I was relying on the reporting of Axios. So for the first time in my life, I am now defending Axios for not having been the irresponsible voice that claimed there was a bridge from the West Bank to Gaza. They didn't do this. Judy Woodruff did it.
Here's my point, is that it wasn't just Democrats who were demoralized before July 21st. It was the media too. They were just as demoralized. They thought Trump was going to win, and so there was kind of this I don't know, sluggishness to their reporting, and they were kind of trotting out all the same attacks. But now, hey, they got a shot. Harris is making this race competitive. Democrats are enthusiastic and everything, and the media is jazzed as well. And so Judy Woodruff, she's caught up in the joy and all the flags, and Oprah's there, and Trump is trying to ruin this peace negotiation, which Bibi has already accepted. And now the New York Times, did you look at this? There's got to be something going on here, and this employee at Arlington National Cemetery tried to stop it, and she was, was pushed aside shoved aside by those awful Trumpers. Let's get into this and let's really dig. So that's what we're seeing here, and we're going to see it, as to Abe's suggestion, through the election now. And if Trump wins, we're going to see it again. It will all be the same thing that we went through for 4 years, just for another 4 years.
I just think we have to acknowledge that most Republican candidates Trump is a special case always, but most Republican candidates for president in my lifetime have faced a hostile press every day. There is a mythological perspective on the part of liberals and leftists in the United States that, while nominally it may be true that every poll and every survey taken since that guy at George Washington University, whose name now eludes me, who first started doing this in the early 80s, was taking surveys of reporters in Washington and discovering that 80 to 90% of them were Democrats or voted Democrat, and is still the case. That while nominally you can say that reporting is reporters are skewed to the left, they want to be objective, blah, 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 but that Republicans always have this mythical way of defeating it through their hypnotic imagery. Michael Deaver's hypnotic control of the imagery that made Reagan look good, even while the news stories made Reagan look bad. Or George H.W. Bush being called a wimp until he fought back against a wimp, a guy who flown 58 combat missions in World War II and been shot down and been swimming in the ocean for 8 hours, threatened possibly by sharks. And Dan Rather had the nerve, psychotic Dan Rather, now 93 years old and staving off meeting his maker so that he should account for the efforts he's tried to make to destroy other people, when all of that, calling him a wimp, and then on and on and on. Every time people have done this, the one thing is that reporters like George W. Bush and they like John McCain because they were nice to him. But this has been the case with every Republican campaign forever, that they have a hostile press, and at some point they have to deal with it and answer it. And Trump it will be the same. I don't know how much worse this is than some of that. Is this worse than Romney with the dog on the roof, or Romney killing somebody on his staff because of health benefits who had cancer?
Here's how I think it's different.
Okay.
It's different in that when previous Republican presidents encountered a hostile mainstream media, the mainstream media still held itself to this imaginary that they are as hard on the Democrats as they were on the Republicans. And in today's media, especially the younger people in the mainstream media, they see themselves on the side of the Democrats in order to challenge the Republicans.
I think it's worse than that. They see not siding with democratic values as a betrayal of journalism, and they'll argue that. That's the My
Right.
Truth stuff. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
that's what
there's-
makes
right.
it different.
Okay.
And there's the internal factions among the liberal media, whereby the traditional, still liberal media that would try to sort of cling to the fiction that we're talking about, they fear the wrath of the younger, radical, overtly activist media. So they have to sort of, nudge toward them in order to stay safe.
And it's not just that they fear the wrath. The institutions themselves are operating on a different financial model, particularly institutions like the New York Times, which is the most successful publication of the digital era. But all publications of the digital era who are now responsible primarily for their financial health to their subscribers rather than their advertisers. Advertisers always want to bias toward the middle because they're trying to sell to the most people and offend the least. And the subscribers want fan service. And so the New York Times is doing its job as it is now constituted fiduciarily with its responsibility toward its stockholders in skewing to the left, because it's what their readers want. That's how they eliminate churn, which is when subscribers drop off and then you have to spend all this money to get more of them. And so they are rewarded. This is now where we are. And that is an entirely different reality. So we have four different realities then coming together to mean that maybe the atmosphere is worse for Trump than it was for previous Republicans.
And there's also this thing that happened when Trump first ran for president, which was, among some liberal media types, there was this, okay, you know what? I got to admit, we have wrongfully demonized Republicans in the past. Mitt Romney was not the monster we made him out to be. We had disagreements with him. George Bush was not the monster we made him out to be. But now this guy is. So now, and that worked as a kind of license for them to say,
so if DeSantis
so now we
had
really
won,
have to go all out. Yeah.
Right. So if DeSantis had won, of course, it would be, say what you would about Trump.
Right.
But, at least he wasn't, blah, blah, blah. Like, so they didn't get, they don't have that now because they can't have the last guy that they can say, well, in retrospect, you know what? He conducted he was actually kind of tough on Ukraine and Russia and its behavior toward Ukraine.
Oh, but here's where I disagree.
Is wussy. Okay.
Here's where I disagree. We're going to get that if Trump wins. We're going to get Trump in his first term was actually, at least he didn't do this and at least he didn't do that. And you remember when he did this and now it's worse. You're going to get Trump compared to Trump.
Okay,
guaranteed.
Fair enough. Okay, let me just take another minute to talk to you about my favorite new summer shirt from Quince, the beautiful olive green linen shirt. I've been wearing it with a lot of nice comments about it. And trust me, I don't get a lot of nice comments on my clothing. So it's a fun thing for me to have this happening. And Quince has all the seasonal must-haves, like that 100% European linen shirt that I'm wearing for $30. Performance polos, versatile activewear, and all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories and cut out the cost of the middleman, passing the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. So fill your closet with timeless pieces you'll be wearing for summers to come with Quince. Go to quince.com/commentary for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/commentary to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/commentary. So tonight begins the Kamala Harris interaction that has literally not taken place since she entered this race. There is going to be somebody asking her a question that she will then have to answer. Dana Bash on CNN, beginning at 9 tonight, taped at 1:45 this afternoon, will be asking her questions while her guard dog, Tim Walz, is sitting next to her, holding her hand and
He's an emotional support animal, John.
Thank you very much. Okay. So I got a couple of things to point out about this. Somebody sent around a clip yesterday of Dana Bash talking about the Democrats and the Democratic ticket over the course of the last month. And while in my mind, I do not think of Dana Bash as being a kind of slavish adherent to the liberal consensus on politics, you would be hard pressed to argue that after this 2.5 minute compendium that I saw on Twitter yesterday, and that you can probably look up, just Dana Bash, Kamala Harris, something like that. So that's one thing, which is, okay, so apparently she chose Dana Bash because, while I thought, interesting, she could have gone with Gayle King, Dana Bash gives every indication of maybe being Gayle King. That's so that we don't know what kind of question she's going to ask or it's going to happen. Second of all, we don't know if it's live to tape, meaning, are they going to show, starts at 1:30? Are they going to tape it through for 48 minutes or for an hour and show it whole? Or are they going to edit it? We don't know that yet. They haven't said it's live to tape. Weirdly enough, they shouldn't. It should be live to tape, but we don't know that. But third, she is going to have to answer questions. And I'm now going to presume that she's going to do fine and that this is going to be hailed as a triumph and that Democrats are going to continue to be on their high through the Labor Day weekend and beyond. Anybody have any thoughts about this? Oh, and I should mention, very importantly, we are going to do a live emergency, not live. We're going to do an emergency podcast tonight after the Dana Bash interview.
Live to tape.
So that'll be up for people who are up on the East Coast around midnight, and for those of you on the West Coast, you'll be able to hear it at 9 and all of that, and tomorrow and all day Friday, because we're not going to do a podcast Friday morning. Anyway, thoughts about what we might see?
I think there will not be a stumble at all, and I also think it will be very low on content, on meaningful content, which will be hailed as
Abe's political nihilism is really showing this episode. He's called the election for Kamala already. Weeks ago, he called it for Kamala.
Yeah. Okay, so Abe is taking the over.
By the way, and afterward on our emergency podcast, we will be saying it was the most ridiculous thing we've ever seen. And we'll be right.
Okay.
Bill Kristol has Doug Sosnick, the former Clinton strategist, great Democratic consultant, strategist, thinker,
and honest.
Honest. I'm a friend of Doug's, and I admire his work. And he's on Conversations with Bill Kristol. And one of his comments on the conversation is, she's going to make mistakes. There's going to be something that happens in these 70 days that she'll make a mistake, and maybe she'll make a mistake tonight. I don't know. What I do know is the people who are inclined to like Harris will like her. They like that personality that she displays, and she has a kind of a warm affect, and she's attractive, and she'll be tough. She'll try to convey that toughness. But having watched her appear before this school gym yesterday as part of her bus tour, yes, I was reminded of everything I can't stand about Kamala Harris, which is it's completely vapid. She speaks like she's an assistant high school principal to these kids. It's meaningless. And so, I guess I'm looking for, can she speak seriously about these questions of policy? And if she's forced to explain how she changed her mind if she has changed her mind on Medicare for all, abolish ICE, confiscate the guns, ban fracking, abolish the filibuster for the Green New Deal, ban ban. No, I want to ban the electric vehicles. She wants to ban the internal combustion engine by 2034, 10 years in her Senate bill. If she has changed her mind about all those things, why? And what I'm hearing now in some of the reporting is she's going to say, well, I've grown in office. You got to do better than that. You got to try to explain your new policy. That's what I'll be paying attention to. But she might not be even asked that.
I'd like to see if we get policy stands at all, because if you remember that ad that I think Matt is talking about, the McCormick ad, where she says, "I'll ban this, I'll ban that," are all videos of her being asked, "Would you do X?" And she says, "Absolutely." So in 2019 and heading into the 2020 season, she was the type of candidate who said, "Yes, absolutely, I will do that." And so now she's become the sort of candidate where nobody knows what she actually thinks. So I think the goal tonight is, I agree that she sounds ridiculous when she speaks off the cuff quite often. But I think it's more important to say, did we learn anything about where the campaign officially stands on all these really important policies? Or are we going to hear from the person who 5 years ago would answer every question in absolutes? Are we going to hear, well, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. Joe Biden is the president. I support the president's efforts to blah, blah, blah.
But this is where the role of the media and Dana Bash in particular will be interesting to watch, because when you have a friendly interviewer, which she clearly is, and you have your emotional support vice president sitting next to you, and there are high expectations, I agree with Matt. When she starts talking, we don't like what we hear, and she seems confused, and you all, even if you're sympathetic towards her, you begin to feel secondhand embarrassment on because of her. And at the convention, the reason a lot of independent voters are enthusiastic about her now is that they kept her tightly scripted, little snippets, little TikTok videos, little very short things, and then a very disciplined, very brief convention acceptance speech. That was smart. She can try to do a bit of that on air tonight, but it's not clear that she's going to manage it. However, to the policy point that I think Seth is making, Bash can fill in that vacuity for her by saying, "Oh, so do you mean this about Medicare for all? Or don't you think, so what you're saying is this about fracking?" And that will merge into the seamless blob of, look, Harris has taken this firm stand on this and totally explained to the American people why she's changed her mind. They do this all the time with friendly interviews. It's why they chose her, why they waited so long to prep her for it. And I would predict that we'll see a lot of that in terms of trying to get her to explain herself.
Two things about the high school gym thing. And again, I encourage everybody who is listening who hasn't seen it to watch this clip. It's about 45 seconds. And tell me that it wasn't written by the writing staff of Veep. I mean, it is eerily similar to Veep. I've never quite seen anything like it. In term, it's sort of like a bad Dan Quayle moment from 35 years ago. I mean, sure, her arms are rotating. She's talking argle-bargle nonsense. She says things like, "You're all leaders, but you're all leaders on a team," which, you're leaders and you're on a team, and teams must work together. And I don't know, it's actually hilarious. But maybe it's a Rorschach test a little bit, because maybe we're bringing some of that to our game, and that a non-committed person who is paying attention wouldn't find it funny or wouldn't see the satire in it. Second and final point. Yesterday on CNN, John Berman had on Michael Tyler, campaign communications director of the Harris campaign. And he said, "Hey, what happened with fracking?" Right? He said, the president's changed her position on fracking in Pennsylvania. Do you know why she's changed her position? And Tyler, who seems to be a very adept person, said, "Listen, I mean, she's been very clear here. She's proud of the work she's done as part of this administration, making sure that American energy production is at an all-time high. We want to continue that into her first term in office here. I think that stands in stark contrast to Donald Trump, who may say one thing when he's in Pennsylvania, but frankly, if you look at the Project 2025, yada, yada, yada." And then Berman said, "Okay, but I'll come back to Project 2025 in just a second here, says Berman, but on fracking, was there something that changed her mind specifically during the 4 years of the Biden presidency? And then Tyler literally says the same thing in almost exactly the same words. Again, the vice president is very proud of the Biden-Harris administration's record on energy production and the economy writ large. She wants to continue to build upon the progress that we've made here. I'm only quoting this because this guy is the pro. He's the one who's supposed to be really good at this because this is his job. And we know she's not so good or whatever, but obviously her spokesman come out and issue these statements that say she's changing her position. And this is the best after 38 days of knowing they had to answer the fracking question that they could come up with, which is she's proud of their record. And then he's like, okay, but she changed her mind. Why did she change her mind? And he says, she's proud of her record. And she's proud of her record. And I'm a broken record. I'm going to say she's proud of her record because I don't have an answer for you. And I don't know how to answer it.
Let's dispense with the fiction that Barack Obama doesn't
Right.
know what he's doing.
Right. So I think that's an interesting portent that they don't have it figured out yet how they're going to answer the flip-flopping, because he should have had an answer to the flip-flopping. I mean, again, like if we were sitting in a room for an hour, we could probably draft an answer.
They don't
to the
want
flip-flopping.
Walz to give independent interviews because they don't know what he would say, and then she has no positions. If he
Right.
said something, it would either mischaracterize a position she doesn't hold or diverge from a position
Right.
that she hasn't decided she wants to have.
But
For the
this is
very
what
specific
Biden-
reason that she doesn't have positions. If
No, but
Walz gives a
Biden-
campaign position on something, whatever that position is, he has made a mistake.
But she has also, let's remember, spent the last 3 years under Joe Biden, who frequently undermined his own administrative positions when he opened his mouth to the press or to the public and then had it walked back. So maybe that's what they intend to do as well. She can say whatever she wants. They'll walk it back if it's somehow contradictory.
It's going to be, I mean, that is where you can have a quiescent, slavish, sycophantic, and even propagandistic press. But you can't force people to make themselves look bad when they do it. They have to have some sense of pride in their own performance. And if she treats them with that level of contempt where they are forced to defend her when she can't even competently come up with something face-saving that
They've
they
been doing
can
it
say,
for
look,
3
she
years."
answered the question.
I mean, I don't know. Orange Man
Okay.
bad, John. It fuels a lot
Orange
of
Man,
the-
very bad. Orange Man, very, very bad. Him, very bad. No question. Extremely, extremely bad. Okay, well, you will hear from us later tonight if you remain awake and standing, or you can listen to us tomorrow morning talking about, or tomorrow all day, or whatever you want to talk about what happened tonight that we are now previewing, and we are going to do an Abe watch because I think it's time we may add a segment which is the Abe vibes watch, like who won the vibe.
We know
in
the
interview.
answer.
Okay,
He'll say Kamala won the vibe.
you're not being fair because
How
Abe
dare
is
you.
not.
What-
Abe is
what are you
being
saying
accurate.
about me?
Fair. Abe
I love this.
Abe-
This is great.
Abe is somebody who
We need
will
a
be
graphic.
able to say, I don't know if the vibe went as well for her
All right.
as I expected it would.
I'm
Okay.
waiting on pins and
Totally.
needles.
Okay. All right. Well, you don't have to wait long because, as I say, we will be back, for the late tonight to give you our feelings. And until then, for Abe, Christine, Matt, and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.